I've got two more winners and a loser for the transfer portal. My first winner, we're going to start this one. This one is kind of a hot take, all right? I've got Virginia as a winner this transfer portal. However, that's with the caveat that I'm kind of starting their offseason, probably I would say a week after Brian O'Connor left. So they did lose their 22-year head coach, and he took a lot of the players with him. However, they brought in Chris Pollard, so they kind of snatched a really good head coach from another ACC team. So you're making a in-conference rival worse and improving yourself. He'd been at Duke for 13 years. I mean, we've talked about this guy. We talked about him. He was a potential state guy. We talked about him. Like, that's how good he was. We were discussing him as a potential state coach. He was there for 13 years. He made the Super Regional 4 out of the last 7 years. That doesn't count the COVID year, so 4 out of the last 8. He was able to keep Eric Becker on campus and then brings in AJ Gracia. That is definitely not Garcia. I double-checked it. It's not a typo. It's Gracia, I think. That's how it's pronounced.
Now you're already second-guessing yourself.
Well, that's how it's spelled. I think that's how it's pronounced. And then both of those guys made
I think you're right, because it gets me every time.
I also believe you're right.
Yeah, both of those guys made the USA Collegiate National Team. So they had 2 guys on the roster, which is the same number as state. And then they've also landed 4 additional players from the Duke roster, like I said, was just in a Super Regional. So that's why I kind of list them as a winner, because their offseason started off terribly. And they, after that, had a decent offseason. I mean, it's been decent, and so they kind of bounced back from that just about as well as you could hope. So that's why I list them as a winner, because they recovered from a pretty bad start.
That makes sense. I mean, if you look at the offseason as a whole, it's a loss because you lose one of the best coaches in baseball.
Yeah,
and you lose a lot of players. But I agree. Like, this could have gone so much worse for them. They did a good job to salvage. Salvage the offseason. It doesn't really feel like it's going to have to be a full-blown rebuild from them.
No.
I don't know how good they'll be next year, but, they should be fairly competitive and then, be able to roll into year 2 under Chris Pollard, kind of back at Virginia baseball levels or hopefully close to of, being one of the best teams in the ACC, kind of looking to make Omaha runs or at least, consistent super regionals, host some, yada, yada, yada. It's really weird to be like, that's Virginia baseball because – it's really not. It's Virginia baseball under O'Connor.
It's Brian
O'Connor baseball. But that's so they're hoping to stay close to that standard. I think they may be realistic and realize it won't be quite that good. But if Pollard can kind of get them back to the level like just below that, kind of the Duke level, I think they're very happy with that.
Yeah.
At UVA. So.
Yeah, sure. I don't have anything to add. They did the best they could with the hand Nordell. If you think that they could have done anything
repeat that real quick, Tucker. You cut out a little bit.
I thought they did the best they could with the hand. If you assume that they couldn't have done anything about Brian O'Connor leaving.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a fair assumption. For y'all that couldn't really catch, basically said he feels like they did the best they could, assuming that they had no chance to keep Brian O'Connor.
Yeah.
If they let him walk out the door, if he was like, "Give me this and I'll stay," and they were like, "Nah, we're good."
Yeah.
That's kind of a sell from them. But I agree that's probably not a realistic assumption of what happened.
Yeah. Given that we made him the second highest paid coach in college baseball, and we have the facilities we do and the stadium that we do and the fan base that we do, I really don't think, barring them doing something that would have been very unexpected, I don't really think they had a chance of keeping him. So I consider them a winner, just because I do think that they did a very good job of trying to keeping guys on campus. I mean, they kept Eric Decker and then a couple other pieces, but they did lose a lot. But then they also brought in some Duke pieces. My next winner is the SEC.
Shocker.
Yeah, so the SEC currently has the top 8 transfer classes according to 64 Analytics. My new favorite Twitter account this baseball season, honestly, has been 64 Analytics. They've been really cool to keep up with, and they post a lot. So while I don't subscribe and pay to view all their rankings, they post enough that I can keep up with it. So shout out 64 Analytics on Twitter. They're the best conference in baseball, the SEC is. Other conferences started popping the champagne after a rough first week in the SEC, had 9 of their 13 tournament teams sent home, including the number 1 and number 2 overall seeds, as well as 2 additional regional hosts. But the SEC bounced back by being the only conference to send multiple teams to Omaha and wrapped up the season by winning the championship for the 6th straight time. So, yeah, it's tough out there for other conferences because the SEC has just been dominant as of late, and after an off season or a postseason where everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, the SEC overrated," because as soon as they play other teams, they lose. They win the World Series, the College World Series, and now in the off season, they are absolutely stacking up these teams. I'm not gonna. If you want to talk, Tucker, you got thoughts on that? You laugh, so you clearly you either agree maybe or disagree.
I agree. I think specifically in the SEC, if there was a team I'd want to highlight, it would be South Carolina.
Yeah.
Who had all the talk was about Missouri. South Carolina might have been the second worst baseball team in SEC history this year.
Yeah.
Behind this year's Missouri, or ahead of this year's Missouri. And they had a really good transfer class. I felt like every other day they were landing a pretty notable transfer, at least according to the 64 Analytics website.
Yeah.
So for a program that I honestly thought was just going to kind of languish in misery as long as Paul Mainieri was there, they did a good job of rebuilding the roster and we'll see what they can do this year with it.
Yeah, so there, I just pulled it up. South Carolina is currently 5th, or as of July 4th at 1:20 p.m., the last time they tweeted the rankings, 64 Analytics did. They're 5th. I'll just run through them real quick. Mississippi State is 1st. Tennessee is 2nd. Georgia's 3rd. Texas is 4th. South Carolina at 5. Auburn at 6. Kentucky at 7. And then rounding out the SEC 8, you got Alabama. So, yeah, that's a really good winner. Not one I had pulled on, and it's one of those things where relative to their performance last season, like, it makes them even, like, being top 5 as far as transfer portal goes is good, but then considering how poor they were last season, it's, like, incredible to kind of be like, wow, like, last season, 64 Analytics tweeted this, their top 5 transfer portal classes were all super regional hosts. So I don't know how, like, over previous years, how that holds up, but it's kind of like, if you're top 5, like, you're not guaranteeing you're going to be super regional hosts, but the expectation is you're going to be a good team. So that's really big for South Carolina. And this portal season's not over yet, but yeah, that could be really, really good for them this offseason.
Yeah, South Carolina's 5th. I'm pretty sure that matches their SEC win total from last year. Didn't they win 5 games? I could be wrong.
I'll look it up. But you keep going, Sanders. I'll look it up.
That could be tough. So that would be really tough for them, but also, encouraging. And so as my one loser, you actually mentioned them, is Missouri. So Missouri baseball, they went 3-27 in conference play last year, 16-39 overall.
They won 6 games, Tucker. Okay, let's pump the brakes on the hate, man. Okay.
I gotta respect the game, guys.
Yeah.
6 whole games,
put
man.
some respect on their name. That's over half as many as A&M won.
This is true.
And twice as many as my loser, Missouri. Missouri went 16-39 overall last year, 3-27 in conference play. Jack remembers all 3 of their wins vividly. They came in College Station against his Aggies. It was insane. A&M is just a much better team than them. They should have gone 0-30. I don't know how they won 3 games on the road against A&M.
It's pretty impressive, honestly.
Yeah, like if you looked at that preseason schedule, it's like those are probably the 3 games they were least likely to win is on the road at A&M.
Yeah.
While other SEC teams, like we just discussed, are reloading, Missouri's had 15 players enter the portal, including a freshman pitcher, Will Libbert, who pitched the most games of anyone on the roster and is leaving for one of those reloading teams in Ole Miss. So to replace those losses, they brought in an outfielder from Wichita State, a senior from A&M who hit .231 last season, and a pitcher from Nova Southeastern. So I don't know what kind of performances they're expecting from those guys, and I think they made other additions that I couldn't find, but it's just considering they're kind of the opposite of the South Carolina offseason, where after a really bad season, South Carolina's got a top 5 transfer class. Missouri is just leaking out of it's just bad. They're losing guys left and right. And in their defense, the guys they're losing went 3-27 in conference play last year. But I just haven't been super impressed with what they've done to kind of try and improve on last season. So they're my loser in this transfer portal. We kind of kept it all in the SEC. It is unfortunately the baseball I know best, and I got to be more diverse going forward. But tough off season. So yeah, you were talking about Missouri a second ago, Tucker. You got thoughts there?
Yeah, it's just bleak. I think the care factor is just not there for Missouri. I think
Agreed.
their AD at the end of the season kind of had a press conference where he just kind of said, "Yeah, we're not putting the resources into baseball that to make it competitive."
Yeah.
And at the time, I kind of read it as we're not doing that now. We're going to do that in the future because the coach can't compete with the amount of money we put into it. But it seems like they just kind of said that as like, yeah, we don't expect our coach to win in baseball because our fans don't care about it.
Yeah. That's
And maybe that's wrong, but that's kind
No,
of the way
I think you're right
reads at
there.
this point.
I think it shows too that like they don't really fire their coach, even though he doesn't perform well, because they understand that they're not trying. So at least they do that. At least they don't have unrealistic expectations for the amount of effort they put in and the amount of resources they put in. But yeah.
all right. Sven said he doesn't know if the SEC is the best conference in the future. The rev sharing amongst all sports will hurt teams like LSU, Tennessee, Florida, or Texas. Coastal will spend the whole $20.5 million on baseball. I don't know the details of rev sharing. Is it $20.5 million per school, or is it sorted by tiers depending on your conference?
I think each gets 18.5 mil. I didn't even know it was 20.
It's 20.5.
Okay, 20.5.
So every team.
I think it's 18.5 for athletes and 2 million for scholarships.
Okay. That's where the
That's
20.5
Like
comes
extra
from.
Cool.
scholarships, as far as like filling out baseball scholarships, giving non-revenue sports scholarships. stuff
Makes
like that.
sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I will say, so like a team like Coastal, if they really can just give all their money to baseball, will consistently have really good rosters. I mean, they already do. They were right there this past season.
Yeah.
But I mean, every other conference, the ACC is going to still have to divvy up resources. The Big Ten is going to have to divvy up resources.
Yeah.
Throughout all programs. So there may be a couple of blips that don't, but everyone's kind of under the same boat. And we've seen the SEC in the past prioritize baseball more than any other conference. And so I don't see why they wouldn't continue to prioritize baseball more than any other conference in this revenue sharing era.
Yeah. Sven does make a really good point, though, and I hadn't considered this. Is he said $25.5 million per school. If you think about like a Creighton basketball,
Yeah, I mean, that's the best example. They just may be cold.
like, are they just going to that?
Yeah, I think basketball it's going to matter way more than baseball.
Yeah,
personally.
but even like a Coastal Carolina is not a basketball school or a football school, so they might be putting 75 or 70% of their resources towards that. Yeah, that's right, Sven. Yeah, St. John's, Gonzaga will put all that money or the majority of that money towards basketball. That's going to be really interesting. I have not even thought about that until now, about how like, because for us in the ACC, the SEC will probably still be better because just like the SEC, the ACC will also have to be divvying up. Louisville is going to have to put money towards football, baseball, basketball, women's basketball. Clemson is going to have to work on their baseball and basketball programs. So against those upper tiers where all the schools have all of the programs, it's going to remain probably a pretty similar order.
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about how these little schools who are only baseball, or not only, but primarily baseball or primarily basketball, how that's going to benefit them.
I will say, like, a lot of the schools that only have one sport aren't as big of names. Not necessarily the basketball schools, because those are, big name brands in basketball. But, like, if you go to an LSU baseball over school like Stetson, for example, or Campbell,
Yeah.
who has had good baseball success, LSU's brand is a lot bigger, so like outside endorsements, like becoming a Gatorade sponsored
That is
athlete,
true.
is a lot more likely. Stuff like that just is still gonna play a factor, and also realistically, we're just gonna go back to money being pushed under the table.
Yeah.
So I am interested. I do think it's gonna have an impact. I'm just interested to see how big it really is.
Yeah.
When you kind of throw in all the factors, and the McDonald's bag's full of cash.
Yeah. And that is true, is that the endorsements will still be a pot, like, we're going to try and get to that place where NIL is actually NIL. And so LSU is going to have just easy access with Canes and all of that kind of stuff.
You go to Florida, you like are a guaranteed Gatorade athlete, basically. Like
Go to Mississippi State, you're guaranteed a Reed sponsorship.
massive.
Mossy Oak.
Mossy Oak, yeah. So
Well, that's what I mean. You need all the trucks and boots back in that state locker room.
Yeah.
So
Sven said LSU is one of the few schools to have a billionaire in the background as a donor. there's a lot of. I mean, A&M's got them. Texas has them. Ohio State.
The stat at
Michigan.
one point was, I don't know if this still holds, but A&M had the most Fortune 500 CEOs as alum. So, which is kind of interesting.
So
now, I don't know
A&M
how involved all of them are, but, A&M is a 40-year commitment.
Yeah.
Our alumni network is just massive. Everyone commits. So, I would
So-
hope they're ponying up the big bucks for us.
There's definitely at least a dozen schools out there who are very well funded. And even now we're seeing Texas Tech, and we don't have to get into that right now, but I think Texas Tech must have just spawned in some billionaires because of the money they must be dealing out.
It is strange that they just had an oil billionaire that just I guess it seems like he just decided to start caring, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, it could look very different the way sports works even after revenue sharing. I hope it's better, but I think that's kind of all of our college sports stuff.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for joining, Tucker, as always.
Yeah.
I am sure you'll be back on here at some point this fall for football.
yep.
You have to join us a couple times for our weekly state recap. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. You helped Sanders out a lot. You didn't make him talk all alone. So.
Yeah, I think Jack said probably 6 words in the state baseball stuff.
Yeah, I said 6 words, and I think 5 of them weren't state baseball related.